All right, let's get right into it. Over the weekend, a bombshell promise dropped on social media. A $2,000 check for most Americans. But here's the thing, is it a real plan or is it just political noise? Today, we're going to cut through all the headlines and really unpack the promise, the, frankly, conflicting messages, and the massive price tag of this proposed tariff dividend. So, it all kicked off with this post right here on Truth Social. And the claim was incredibly simple and direct. A dividend, at least $2,000 for pretty much every person. And it's all going to be paid for by tariffs on foreign goods. As you can imagine, a promise that big grabbed headlines instantly. And that's really the $2,000 question, isn't it? Is this a concrete policy that's in the works, or is there a whole lot more going on behind the scenes? Let's break down what we know. Okay. First things first, let's look at the promise itself. What exactly was said and how was it all presented to the public? So the announcement on November 9th was pretty forceful. A direct payment funded by tariff revenue going to most Americans. The language was strong too, with the president calling opponents of his tariff policy fools and really hyping up the nation's wealth. But, almost as soon as that post went live, the official story started to get, a little complicated. And this is where things get really, really interesting. Let's take a look at how the president's own team responded, because, their story sounded quite a bit different. Almost immediately, you had key members of the administration who seemed to be walking back the certainty of the president's post. So instead of confirming a plan was in motion, they started introducing a whole lot of maybes and what-ifs. And that created this huge disconnect. On one side, you've got this very specific, very exciting promise of a $2,000 dividend. But on the other side, the official line was, we don't have a formal proposal, that the president was just brainstorming, and that any benefit could come in lots of forms. In fact, the National Economic Council director, Kevin Hassett, basically framed it as a negotiating tool, not some standalone policy. He suggested it was all part of an effort to help the Senate reach a deal to end the government shutdown that was going on. And that right there adds a whole new layer of political context to this thing. So what about that phrase, lots of forms? Well, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent clarified that this might not mean a check at all. He suggested it could be a whole bunch of different tax decreases on things like tips, overtime, Social Security. That's a world away from a direct payment just landing in your bank account. Okay, so let's put the conflicting messages aside for a second. There's an even bigger question here. Even if this were a formal, agreed-upon plan, does the math actually work? Let's dig into the numbers. So the plan says the money comes from tariff revenue. That's pretty straightforward. So the fundamental question becomes, okay, how much revenue is there really? And how much would this whole dividend thing actually cost? According to an analysis by the Tax Foundation, once you account for everything, the full budgetary impact, the tariffs have raised about $90 billion in net revenue. Okay, so that's our starting pot of money, $90 billion. But here's where the plan just hits a brick wall. That $90 billion in revenue, it's absolutely dwarfed by the estimated cost of the dividend. The very same analysis puts that cost at over $300 billion. Just look at that gap. That's a funding shortfall of more than $200 billion, which is a pretty major challenge. To really understand this proposal, it helps to know that this idea, giving tariff money back to Americans, it isn't exactly new. Actually, we've heard different versions of it for a while now. This whole concept has been floating around in various forms pretty much all year. It goes all the way back to a wild $5,000 Doge dividend idea discussed with Elon Musk in February, then evolved to the president and Senator Josh Hawley suggesting smaller rebates over the summer. This latest $2,000 proposal, it's really just the biggest and loudest version of an idea that's been kicking around for months. So when you put it all together, the conflicting messages, the huge financial hurdles, the whole history of this idea, what are the real-world obstacles actually standing in its way? Well, there are several major roadblocks. First off, a plan like this would almost certainly need approval from Congress, and that is a very high bar to clear. On top of that, officials have been clear, nothing happens until the government shutdown ends. Then you've got the fact that the very tariffs that are supposed to fund the plan are being challenged at the Supreme Court. And finally, the Treasury itself has said its main priority for this money isn't new programs, it's paying down the national debt. And all of this brings us right back to that central question. After looking at the mixed messages and the pretty much impossible math, is this $2,000 tariff dividend a serious policy in the making, or is it maybe something else? a powerful tool of persuasion designed to rally support and get some leverage in Washington's political battles. While a check in the mail seems pretty unlikely, the power of the promise itself, well, that's undeniable.